Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Meher Sher and these are the headlines. Four people have died after President Donald Trump's supporters stormed the U.S. Capitol, prompting a curfew. Police said they have arrested 52 rioters as they smashed windows of the building, suspending a session to certify President-elect Joe Biden's victory. After the riots, the House of Representatives and the Senate rejected a move by Trump's allies to overturn Joe Biden's victory in Arizona. Syria says its air defenses have destroyed Israeli missiles on a number of targets over its southern region. The Syrian state media said the missiles came from the direction of the occupied Golan Heights, but Israeli media claims that the missiles struck the southern western areas of the capital, Damascus. Libya's government of national accord and the Libyan National Army, led by Khalifa Haftar, have conducted a fresh prisoner swap. A member of GNA's military committee said Haftar's forces freed 27 prisoners in exchange of 8 members. He said the swap was carried out under the supervision of the 5+5 Libyan Joint Military Commission. The global number of COVID-19 infections has surpassed 87 million with over 1.8 million deaths. Britain has recorded highest daily cases with over 62,000 new infections for the second day in a row as its caseload tops 2.8 million. China has reported its highest 63 single-day COVID-19 infections since July as authorities try to curb the outbreak near Beijing. Meanwhile, Pakistan has registered nearly 2,500 new cases and 50 deaths overnight, taking the toll to over 10,500. And in football, Manchester City have outclassed Manchester United 2-0 in the semi-final of the Carabao Cup at Old Trafford. Second-half goals from John Stones and Fernandinho sealed City's victory. They will now face Tottenham Hotspur in the final at Wembley on April 25th. Well, those were the headlines. More news in detail after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. And now for the news in more detail. We begin in the United States, where 4 people have died after President Donald Trump's supporters stormed the U.S. Capitol, prompting a curfew. Police say they have arrested 52 rioters as they smashed the windows of the building, suspending a session to certify President-elect Joe Biden's victory. This report has more.
Chaos, confusion and violence ensued at the Capitol Hill as the U.S. Congress gathered to debate and authenticate President-elect Joe Biden's victory. Thousands of armed pro-Trump rioters clashed with the police, smashed windows, infiltrated and occupied the Capitol building. They halted the debate and session, forcing a 12-hour lockdown in the U.S. Capitol. A woman was shot dead by the police as demonstrators tried to break into the main hall. Biden blasted the storming and called on President Donald Trump to step up and renounce the violence.
And this god-awful display today is bringing home to every Republican and Democrat and Independent in the nation that we must step up. This is the United States of America. There's never, ever, 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 ever been a thing we've tried to do that we've done it together. We've not been able to do it. So, President Trump, step up.
President Trump, after a while, called on his supporters to back off, but did not condemn the infiltration and violence. Facebook and Twitter have temporarily blocked Trump's accounts for provoking violence. Reconvening after an hours-long delay, Vice President Mike Pence, along with scores of other legislators, condemned Trump's supporters.
Today was a dark day in the history of the United States Capitol. But thanks to the swift efforts of U.S. Capitol Police, federal, state, and local law enforcement, the violence was quelled. The Capitol is secured, and the people's work continues. We condemn the violence that took place here in the strongest possible terms.
Following the riots, the House of Representatives and the Senate rejected a move by Trump's allies to overturn Biden's victory in Arizona. The joint session of the Congress is currently underway to certify Biden's election win over Trump.
And for more on this story, we are being joined by Calvin Dark, an analyst and political commentator on U.S. and international affairs from Washington, D.C. Sir, thank you so much for your time. Calvin, Trump supporters attacked Capitol Hill, suspending the Congress session. Do you see this as a dark day in U.S. history?
Yeah, it's a very unfortunate day that not only did we have the leaders of our country in the line of succession actually threatened and having to be evacuated, but that we had the President of the United States inciting them to do it. And not, in theory, not over the last 4 years, but literally gave a speech that was over an hour, and then they went directly and did this. So in that sense, it is very sad, but it's also a very positive day in this respect. Despite all that's happened, despite all that's happening right now, 6 blocks from where I am, where Congress is still, going through the confirmation of Joe Biden's win of the election, our democracy still stands. And with our election yesterday in Georgia, we now have a new majority in the Senate. So this is a horrible thing that's happened today, but it is not going to have long-term consequences.
From your vantage point, what constitutional actions can be taken against U.S. President Donald Trump for provoking a mob to attack Capitol Hill?
Earlier today, folks have been talking about, censure, 25th Amendment and all those things. And I had discounted that because I said, it's literally 2 weeks from today. Actually, it's slightly less than 2 weeks from today when his term will end. But after we had the deaths, I think we're up to 4 of people that died related to what happened today, I realized that there needs to be something. There needs to be a statement, because that is what we cannot continue to have in our history, is something that goes on like this and it's not corrected. However, with our system, and I kid you not, was looking at the 25th Amendment and reading what some other scholars had said, there's actually not enough time. But I do hope that our Congress will take some action, even if it's just a statement condemning what was done today.
Calvin, last week, 11 U.S. senators said they would refuse to certify President-elect Joe Biden's win, and riots were expected. Why then weren't precautionary measures taken to prevent the unrest we saw today?
Well, that's a very good question. And as you know, in this country, particularly this year, we've had many protests over systemic racism. And today, with this going on in the Capitol, is a perfect example of that. They knew this. Donald Trump said 2 weeks ago, I think he said a week after that this will be wild today. So this didn't come as a surprise. What happened was, in our country, when you have white protesters, they're viewed as First Amendment, free speech protesters. If they're people of color like me, they're violent, and they would have been taken down by the police. I guarantee you, I would not have been able to get into the Speaker of the House's personal office and put my feet on the desk to take a selfie. And so what that represents is not that they weren't prepared, but that the systemic racism that we have in law enforcement in this country that views white people making noise as protesters and people of color making noise as people that need to be shot, taken down, or whatever. So that was the fault of what happened today.
Calvin Dark, thank you so much for talking to Indus News. And now moving on, we are also being joined by Dr. Carl Cavalli, a political analyst from Georgia. Sir, thank you so much for your time. Dr. Cavalli, a mob of Trump supporters breached the U.S. House of Representatives and Senate chambers. 4 people have died on U.S. Capitol grounds. Do you think this violence will further escalate after the Congress session certifying President-elect Joe Biden concludes?
That's really hard to tell at this moment. I think it has been it's quieted down a bit. I don't know whether it will pick up again overnight or whether it will pick up again tomorrow. It really, it was a riot. There was vandalism, and there were casualties, unfortunately. But most of the people that made it into the Capitol were simply rioters and vandals, and they simply wandered around and they took pictures of each other and things like that. I think they were fairly aimless once they got inside the Capitol. So I certainly hope that it doesn't escalate, but it may still be too early to tell.
Will legal action be taken against President Trump for inciting unrest and carnage in the Capitol in his last days in office?
Well, that's an interesting question. There are rumors circulating. There's talk that some cabinet members are discussing the 25th Amendment, which is a provision for having the vice president and the cabinet remove the president. I don't know how accurate those rumors are. There's at least one member of the House of Representatives that has introduced articles of impeachment against the president. That usually takes quite a long time. It would not be the most efficient solution for a president with only 2 weeks remaining in office. And he will certainly be subject to prosecution once he leaves office. It is possible he may attempt to pardon himself. That's a bit of legal limbo. We are not sure whether presidents can pardon themselves or not. That certainly, all those things are on the drawing board right now.
Dr. Cavalli, how does this impact President Trump's standing in the Republican Party and his re-election bid?
I think you're starting to see a significant break between President Trump and the Republican Party. Up to now, at best, you saw many former members of Congress, former administration officials criticizing the president, but many people in Congress, people like Ted Cruz of Texas and Graham of South Carolina, who were once president's rivals for election in 2016, have thrown their support behind him and have refused to criticize him. I don't think Lindsey Graham and Ted Cruz are going to break with him completely anytime yet, but you are starting to see there have been a rash of low-level resignations within the White House tonight. There are a number of Republicans that have openly criticized the president and have gone to the press. So I think what you're seeing is that things are changing. The president's support, which was once near unanimous among Republicans, is starting to fall apart.
Dr. Carl Cavalli, thank you so much for talking to Indus News. And now moving on, the U.S. Democrats are on the verge of seizing control of the Senate after sweeping the runoff election in the state of Georgia. With this result, the Senate splits 50-50, extending the tie-breaking vote to Vice President-elect Kamala Harris. And the Democrats will now control the Senate, the House of Representatives, and the White House for the first time since 2009. The win also boosts prospects for President-elect Joe Biden's legislative agenda. Democrats Raphael Warnock and Jon Ossoff defeated Republican rivals Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue. Around 4 million Georgians turned out to vote in the runoff election. In a statement, Biden said Georgians voted for action on the crisis in the country that the country is facing right now. The election was rerun as none of the candidates in the general election achieved the 50% needed for victory. And we'll be back with more news in detail after a short break. Stay with us. We're back. Syria says it has intercepted and shot down multiple Israeli missiles. State media said the missiles were fired from the occupied Syrian Golan Heights, but Israeli media outlets claim that the missiles struck the El Kisweh area south of the capital and the town of Al Dimas west of Damascus. There are no reports of life or material damage yet. Israel's latest assault comes just a week after a round of airstrikes in western Syria, which killed a Syrian soldier and wounded several others. And Libya's government of national accord and the Libyan National Army, led by Khalifa Haftar, have conducted a fresh prisoners swap. A member of GNA's military committee said Haftar's forces freed 27 prisoners in exchange of 8 members. He said the swap was carried out under supervision of 5+5 Libyan Joint Military Commission. He said the exchange took place in the Shwerif area south of the Libyan capital, Tripoli. Libya's warring parties announced a permanent ceasefire in October last year, brokered by the UN in Geneva. The ceasefire was also facilitated by the Joint Military Committee, which includes 5 representatives from each of the rival parties. Now, Germany says Iran's uranium enrichment at 20% is a massive violation of the nuclear deal. Foreign Minister Heiko Maas termed the breach unacceptable. Maas met foreign ministers from Jordan and Sweden in Amman as part of the Stockholm Initiative. The initiative aims at reversing the global trend towards global nuclear rearmament. He said there was a new opportunity for a deal with Iran, as under President-elect Joe Biden, the U.S. might join the deal again. But he added that it was too early to judge the expectations of the incoming U.S. administration.
We believe there is also a new opportunity for the nuclear deal with Iran. The president-elect has so far proven to be open to the idea the United States might join the deal once more. In the coming weeks after January, it will very soon be about exploring the possibilities in that sense, what the expectations of the United States are. So, this is why we can only tell Iran that it would be very dangerous to risk spoiling this opportunity.
Earlier, Tehran said its step of enrichment was according to the nuclear agreement, as other signatories were not fulfilling their commitments. And moving on, the Pakistan Army says one of its soldiers was martyred in firing by terrorists from across the Afghan border. In a statement, the military's media wing said the troops responded effectively to the firing. The Pakistan Army says the terrorists targeted a military post in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa's Mohmand district. The Foreign Office spokesperson Zahid Hafiz Chaudhry said Pakistan calls upon the Afghan government to take immediate action against the terrorists and their safe havens. Islamabad has consistently raised the issue with the Afghan authorities to check cross-border terrorist incidents. Now, Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan has urged the Western world to address the issue of Islamophobia. In an interview to a Turkish news channel, Khan said French President Emmanuel Macron's remarks against Islam were ridiculous. More in this report.
Prime Minister Imran Khan said France's inability to distinguish between extremists and Muslims will have far-reaching consequences. He said blasphemous caricatures of the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, hurt the sentiments of Muslims worldwide. Discussing India, Imran Khan said it has become a state only for Hindus due to the extremist policies of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Khan said the RSS-inspired government of Modi is a threat to all minorities in India, especially Muslims and Christians. He went on to say that his Indian counterpart has time and again used anti-Pakistan rhetoric for political gains. Khan said India is trying to alter the demography of Kashmir to convert the Muslim majority into a minority. The Premier slammed India's brutalities in occupied Valley, including staged encounters and house arrests. He said the Indian government has turned even the most pro-government politicians in Kashmir against the state due to its policies. Turning toward the Middle East, the Prime Minister reiterated that Pakistan will not recognize Israel until Palestinians get their due rights.
Now, the global number of COVID-19 cases has surpassed 87 million, with more than 1.88 million deaths. Britain has recorded the highest daily infections for the second straight day, with over 62,000 cases overnight. Nationwide, the tally of infections has topped 2.8 million. More on the pandemic in the following report.
As global coronavirus cases shoot through the roof, the pandemic is projected to get even worse in the coming months before it starts getting any better. The World Health Organization has warned of a hard road ahead before vaccines can turn the tides against the pandemic. Mexico has reported record infections in a day as vaccination efforts continue at a very slow pace. Hospitals in Peru and Bolivia are overflowing as fears of a devastating second wave grow, while health experts in the U.S. state of Arizona warn it has become the hot spot of the world. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has forecast that deaths in the country can hit 48,000 by January 30.
UK variant in the U.S. in at least 5 states, and I would be surprised if that number doesn't grow pretty rapidly. People travel around. This should not be a surprise. That does seem to be a virus that has about a 70% higher ability to transmit from one person to the next. And you can see how, therefore, it has been very successful in dominating what's happening in the UK, and we should think about where that's going to take us in the US as well.
The European Union has approved the Moderna vaccine, making it the second drug to be cleared for general use across the Eurozone. But anxiety continues to mount over the slow progress of vaccination programs in the region. The situation in the UK continues to worsen, with record hospitalizations and more than 1,000 deaths reported overnight. However, despite stringent restrictions, the public has not been following the SOPs meted out by the government.
A lot busier than the first lockdown. There's a lot more people in central London, a lot more commuters on the trains. I think it's just busier in general. I mean, this time in March, the streets were completely empty, no traffic, completely dead, whereas there's people, as you can see, milling around.
Japan has set out a new record by reporting nearly 6,000 new cases as the government prepares to declare a state of emergency in Tokyo and 3 neighboring prefectures. And China has reported its highest number of cases in a single day since July as authorities try to contain a cluster near Beijing. Meanwhile, Australia has again moved the rollout of a coronavirus vaccine to mid to late February.
Whereas in Pakistan, 50 people have lost their lives to COVID-19 over the past 24 hours. This takes the country's death toll to 10,511. The health ministry reported 2,482 new infections overnight. There are more than 34,000 active cases in the country. Out of over 495,000 countrywide cases, more than 450,000 people have recovered. The ministry said over 221,000 cases have been detected in the Sindh province. Punjab has reported over 142,000 cases so far. The United States has approved a bridge loan of $1.2 billion for Sudan. The loan is part of Washington's aid package to Sudan following its removal from the U.S. terror list. Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin signed an agreement that allows the African country to clear World Bank arrears. In a statement, the Treasury said the loan will be provided after Sudan implements conditions agreed upon under a bilateral MOU. It said the African country must also abide by conditions agreed with the World Bank. The statement added Mnuchin commended Khartoum's bold steps leading to its removal from the terror list. This comes after Khartoum announced normalizing ties with Israel under the Abraham Accords. Moving on, Myanmar police have arrested nearly 100 ethnic Rohingya after raiding a house in the commercial capital of Yangon. Authorities frequently detain Rohingya for attempting to leave their native Western Rakhine state. Police say an investigation is underway and the group will be sent to a quarantine center to prevent the spread of COVID-19. Human rights group Fortify Rights has called for the immediate and unconditional release of all those detained. Some 600,000 Rohingya live in Myanmar under what Amnesty International has called apartheid conditions. The vast majority lack citizenship and are considered illegal immigrants from neighboring Bangladesh. Divers in Russia are jumping into icy water in the dead of winter to search for some ancient bones. They also dug up skulls of ancient bulls, horses, and lions, as well as tools which were likely used by early humans. More in this report.
Ancient shark teeth, bones of woolly rhinoceros, mammoths, and other extinct animals attracted the Russian paleontologists to the ice-covered Tobol River, some 2,000 kilometers east of Moscow. For almost 2 decades, scientists have teamed up with divers for a bone hunt on the outskirts of the town of Kurgan. The search takes place 3 meters underwater as the air temperature drops to -20 to 25 degrees Celsius.
There is no bigger pleasure but to overcome such difficulties and to see something which no one saw before you. Artifacts aged tens of thousands of millions of years, it gives a rare pleasure and thrill.
The bone-rich underwater area, which is believed to be around 1 kilometer long, was discovered by divers in 2004. It is described as a unique ancient bone deposit. According to the scientist, each year river waters uncover a new mix of remains as old as 66 million years.
Among rare finds, we had a bone of a cave lion, which was an extreme rarity then and still is one. As for the Turgai Sea, the West Siberian Glacial Lake period, we found fossil teeth in sharks and shark rays. They all are precious and unique, and they have fantastic energy in them.
This year's findings will traditionally be transferred to local museums after initial studies at the Russian Academy of Sciences.
On to business. Stocks in Asia Pacific are trading mixed as investors react to the unrest in Washington and COVID-19 vaccine rollouts. Seoul's Kospi has jumped nearly 2.5%. Shares in Australia, too, have gained, with the ASX 200 rising over 1.5%. In Japan, the Nikkei 225 and the Topix Index have risen nearly 1.5%. But mainland Chinese shares and Hong Kong's Hang Seng have slipped over 0.5%. And now it's time to take a look at the latest weather updates from around the world. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.